Hey, friends, welcome back to Discovering the Lutheran Faith. I'm your host, Pastor David Murby, as we explore the concept of what do we as Lutherans believe. In today's session, session 4, we're going to be looking at the fall of man and the Ten Commandments. This is part 8 of session 4 in your workbooks. And we're going to be answering the question, what does sin require? So I want to invite you to open up your workbooks to page 43, your Discovering the Lutheran Faith workbooks. If you don't have a workbook, just message me and I'll be happy to get you a copy. You can also check in with our church office at Good Shepherd Lutheran Church in Gardendale, Alabama. We'd love to be able to send you a free workbook. So let's look at this topic. What does sin require? Because sin, as we saw in the previous session, session 7, episode 7 of session 4, because sin results in broken relationships, both between God and people, God provides in both the Old and New Testament a solution to the problem. In the Old Testament, we call this the sacrificial system as outlined in the book of Leviticus. So you can open up your Bible, you can go to the third book of the Bible, which is Leviticus, and there you'll find the sacrificial system outlined. Here in that book, God requires 5 different offerings and one special way to deal with the problem of sin amongst God's people. See, when Moses brought the people of God out of Israel, while he was at Mount Sinai, God told him to build a tabernacle. And the tabernacle was the place where God would dwell. The presence of God would dwell. And it is where God's people would come on this beautiful altar that was to be made, and offerings would be made. And these offerings would deal with the problem of sin in a variety of ways and also give opportunities to celebrate and give thanks to God for his goodness. And so these offerings would be offered to the Lord at the tabernacle. Later, the tabernacle would become the temple, and then later the temple would be destroyed and then rebuilt and destroyed and rebuilt and then destroyed one last time, never to be rebuilt again. And so this system that God established, right, it always had in mind Christ as its fulfillment. Christ will actually become the fulfillment of all of these offerings, all of these sacrifices. So in the book of Leviticus, you're going to find that there's 5 different offerings made. You've got a fellowship offering, a grain offering, a peace offering, a burnt offering, and a sin offering. 5 different kinds of offerings, each with a different purpose. In fact, in your workbooks, there is a page entitled The Tabernacle, and in it will be the sacrifices made in the temple, and it will outline each individual sacrifice and then show you how it's pointed to Christ as the fulfillment. Now, the thing about the Old Testament sacrificial system is that it was limited in scope. There was a limitation with the Old Testament system, is that it was only temporary and had to be repeated. And so every year, every month, every week, people will be making these sacrifices, and then they have to come back and do it again and again and again. In fact, even on their special day, the Day of Atonement, where all the sin of all of Israel, both known and unknown, intentional and unintentional, was forgiven, wiped clean. The slate was freed. That even had to be repeated every single year. And so it was a temporary, repeated system that was ultimately going to be ultimately fulfilled and therefore no longer needed. And that comes in the person of Christ. Because of that temporary nature, God sent a permanent solution in the person of Jesus Christ, who becomes the only and sacrifice that we will ever need. He's the only sacrifice. He's the one and only sacrifice that we will ever need. In fact, I love the way that Paul describes it in Ephesians chapter 5. Be imitators of God, therefore, as dearly loved children, and live a life of love, just as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us as, watch this, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. He is a fragrant offering. He's a sacrifice to God. The Bible also tells it in this way. Just as man is destined to die once, and after that to face judgment, so Christ was sacrificed. Why? To take away the sins of many people. And he'll appear a second time, not to bear sins, not to offer another sacrifice, but to bring salvation to those who are waiting for him. Okay, friends. Next time we're together, we're going to pick up with section 4. And in that session 5, we're going to be looking at the person of Jesus as it's unfolded in the Apostles' Creed. Can't wait. It's one of my favorite sessions. We'll see you next time on Discovering the Lutheran Faith.